Hey, what's going on, y'all? Welcome to the Endless TBR. My name is Christian, and this is my YouTube channel where I love to talk about books. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to click on this video where I'm going to rank the 21 Stephen King books that I've read in order from my least favorite to my favorite. So, I recently finished my 21st Stephen King novel, and I thought this would be a fun time to just kind of take a pause, reflect, and rank them all so I can look back in the future and see how my opinions have changed. I know this isn't even a dent in Stephen King's total bibliography. I have a lot to go, and I'll certainly be making more rankings in the future. But I thought it would be fun to make this video so I can kind of look back on it and see how my ranking has changed over time. You'll notice that my selection of Stephen King books is kind of random. I didn't start reading King too long ago. It's only been a few years, but at first I was just kind of picking his books at random based off of what my fiance already owned. And I did like 7 or 8 books like that, just like grabbing random ones off the shelf. And then I decided to stop and go back to the beginning and start reading Stephen King in publication order. So you'll notice I have like his first like 12 or so books in this list. And then after that, there's a bunch of just like randomly selected ones. So that's the reasoning for that. But let's get into it. I'm going to keep these spoiler free. I'm going to keep them relatively short too, so that this video isn't like over an hour long. And let's do it. So coming in at number 21 is the only Stephen King book that I don't own physically in this list, and it's also the only one on this list that I would say I didn't like, and that is Rage, his first Richard Bachman book. There's a lot of different reasons why people don't like this story, namely, a lot of the criticism has to come from the content. It has to do with a school shooting, which I'm not a big fan of that either. I don't particularly like reading about school shootings. When I do go into horror novels, I do expect to be uncomfortable and bothered, but it's, not content that I was really stoked for to begin with. But then ultimately, I found the book to be pretty boring. Like, it was just, it, of all of the books on this list, this one definitely felt like the longest drag to get through. And it's not even that long of a book. But he was doing some like commentary on like Stockholm syndrome. You have all of these kids locked in a classroom with the shooter, and they start kind of telling the main character their traumas, and I just didn't really buy into that in the situation that was happening. And again, I just found it to be overall kind of a dull book. Not on top of that, I didn't really love the content of it, and that's why it's coming in at last place. Coming in at number 20 is going to be Later. Now, this is actually one of the first Stephen King books that I ever read, which is super random, I know. But this, I guess, was written when he was kind of going through like a thriller crime era. And the reason that it's this low on this list is, frankly, I don't really remember much about it. I do remember my general feelings when I finished the book were that I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. But looking back, I really don't remember any plot specific details. I know that there's a kid, he can see dead people, and he teams up with, I think she's either like a cop or a PI or a detective, and together they go to solve crimes. But besides that, I really don't remember too much. I'll definitely revisit this novel, but the fact that I don't remember anything just kind of tells me that it didn't really leave any significant impression on my brain. And so all I'm left with is just remembering, like, yeah, I enjoyed it. And so I couldn't really put it any higher up on this list. So that is Later. Luckily, that's the only book on this list that I really don't remember. Everything else I have pretty clear thoughts on. Coming up in number 19 is going to be Dance Macabre. This is a nonfiction that he wrote, and this is a book where I gave it a higher star review than some of the upcoming books on this list. But when I made this ranking for the Stephen King books, I put it in order of like my personal enjoyment of the story. And while Dance Macabre is well written, and I think it achieves what he's trying to do, where King is talking about the state of the horror genre at the time that he wrote it in like the late 70s, early 80s. He's talking about what he thinks is some of the most influential horror works of his time. He talks about his favorite horror books, his favorite horror movies. You get a little backseat view into the writing of his first 5 books. So a lot of good stuff if you're just a fan of Stephen King and wanting to like peer into his brain a little bit. But this is a pretty dull read with it being a nonfiction. It kind of reads more like a textbook than any other book in this list. And so, frankly, it wasn't the most exciting to read. It took me most of a month to get through because I was just reading little portions at a time. There was no point when reading this where I felt really locked in, like, yeah, this is awesome. It was just enjoyable. I think he set out to achieve what he was trying to achieve with it, but definitely one of the least exciting Stephen King books that I've read. So that is Dance Macabre coming in at 19. Next up at 18 is Everything's Eventual. This is a short story collection, and I kind of have mixed feelings on this one. When I was looking through the 14 stories in this book, there are a few that stuck out in my mind that I really remember enjoying a lot. And then all of the other stories in this collection I didn't remember at all, which kind of like later leads me to believe that they didn't really leave an impression on me, and so I didn't really care for them. Going through the table of contents, my favorite story that I remember from this collection is The Road Virus Heads North. It's about this like haunted painting, and I thought that story was awesome. You have 1408 in here, which I think is probably one of the most popular stories from this collection. I know there's a movie written about a movie about it, and then we also have Lunch at the Gotham Cafe. I remember that one. That one's entertaining. LT's Theory of Pets. That one is really disturbing if you're a pet fan. If you like dogs or cats, go into that with, a bit of tempered expectations. And then there's one other in here that I remember. I think it was The Man in the Black Suit. But besides that, I really don't remember too much else about this short story collection. I'll definitely revisit it. And I remember there's one story in here that ties into the Dark Tower series, which I have not read. And so it didn't really have, any effect on me. Maybe once I've read those books and I go back and revisit it, I'll think differently. But that's kind of how I feel about this collection is most of it I don't really remember too well, and compare that to another one of Stephen King's short story collections that I've read that is one of my favorites of his. It just kind of doesn't bode well for the comparison. So that is Everything's Eventual coming in at number 18. Coming in at number 17 is going to be Roadwork. This is kind of the start of a trend that is going to be happening in a couple of these books that I talk about, where I really enjoy one half of the book and then don't really care for the other half of the book. The first half of Roadwork I thought was pretty dull. It's definitely a slow burn that is trying to set up this main character, Barton Dawes, and the issues that he's having in life. He is down horribly. The government is making this construction project, this highway that's going to demolish the home that he lives in, and it's going to demolish his place of work. So he's going to be out of a home, out of a job. His son has recently passed away. So a lot of essential buildup, but frankly, it was not very exciting, and I wasn't too into the story at the start. Then halfway through, there's this character that's introduced and a lot of significant character moments for Barton Dawes. And from that point to the end, I was very invested in the story. It definitely moves at a much quicker pace. And at the end of the day, this is a story about a guy who's trying to basically say F you to the government and go out in his own terms. Stephen King definitely achieves that. And I really fell in love with Dawes as a character by the end. But I couldn't rank it much higher than this because that first half really, I was not even knowing if I was going to finish this book. I really didn't enjoy the first half. So that is Roadwork. But, check it out if you're a hardcore Stephen King fan. Who knows where this will end up in the grand scheme once I finished all of his books. Coming in at number 16 is going to be Firestarter. It's similar to Roadwork. I loved one half of this book, but we're going to kind of flip flop it. The first half of this story I thought was incredible. I love Andy and Charlie's relationship. They are a father and daughter that are on the run for the government. Andy took place in some government experiments and then had this daughter, Charlie, who has the ability to control and start fires. And she doesn't really have a good control over her power. And this government agency is going after them to try to capture them. And I just love the bond that forms between the two of them, the confusion that Charlie feels, and Andy trying to be there for her as a father and take care of her. Just really, really love everything in the first half of this book. Then a significant thing happens, and the plot changes and the setting changes. And I really can't say much about what happens without spoiling things, so I won't talk about it, but I just didn't really feel that same emotional connection in the second half. By the end of it, I do think the ending of the story was really good, especially what they did with Charlie. I thought was really excellent. Again, don't want to really say anything, but just the second half of this book kind of lost me, and it wasn't until the last like 50 or so pages that I was really brought back into the story. So that is Firestarter coming in at number 16. Next up, number 15 is going to be Cujo. I think this might kind of be an unpopular placement. I know there are people out there that absolutely love this book, and I did enjoy it, but I I felt like there was way too much emphasis on the human characters in this story. I loved everything that had to do with Cujo the dog. The characters that are told from his perspective as he descends into madness from the rabies, when he's out there terrorizing and killing people, all of that, the car sequence towards the end, I thought all of that was thrilling and exciting and scary. But there's a lot of emphasis on the human characters in this story. And the thing is, like, it's not even bad. I mean, it's Stephen King. He does a great job with characterization. So I liked all of the human characters and all of the little subplots. Ultimately, the entire time that I was spent reading about those human characters, I just wanted to get back to Cujo and see what was going on with him. And kind of my ultimate thoughts at the end were I wish all of the Cujo stuff was just like its own little novella so I could read about like the plight and suffering of this dog and his victims. And then all of the other character stuff could have kind of been left out. So that's my personal opinion. I've seen a lot of people say a lot of different things where they love the character aspects, the human aspects of the story. So to each their own. But yeah, I missed out on Cujo for a lot of this story. I wanted to go back to him a lot. So that is Cujo at number 15. Coming in at number 14, so this is a novella that I didn't realize was part of a larger collection until later. I'm still gonna rank it on its own because I do own it as, like, its own physical copy, but this is 1922. Eventually, later down the line, when I do read the collection that this is a part of, I'll just rank that collection as a whole, but for now, I'm just gonna talk about this story. So, I really enjoyed this one. I think the reason that I read this book, if I remember correctly, is there's, like, a movie based off of this. I remember reading the or watching the movie and then being like, I want to read the book. And so I went and picked this up. But this is a really dark and dreary and depressing story. And since it's a novella and it's really short, it's only like 120 pages. I can't really say too much about it because it's really easy to spoil things in a story that's this small. But basically it follows this like father and son and they are living on this farm and it's kind of their descent into madness. They do something absolutely horrible and they have to live with the consequences of that horrible thing they've done. And the dad just everything goes wrong for him and the son goes off on his own path that leads to disaster and it's just a feel bad story where there's no happy endings and everything just kind of falls apart for this family. So you know, not many feel good things coming out of this story, but if you want something dark and dreary and depressing, this is a really good short read. And I really enjoyed it by the ending of this book. I thought it was just really horrific and graphic and disturbing. So yeah, that is 1922. Coming in at number 13, we have another novella, and that is The Mist. I was very familiar with the story before going into it. I had watched the movie, I had watched the TV show. I think there's both, pretty sure. So I'd watched both of those and then finally got to experience the story. And ultimately, I wish it's a novella, so it's very short. Again, I think it's only like 120. This one's a little longer. This one's like 150 pages. I wish there had been more character development in the story. There are some things that Stephen King tries to do at the beginning that didn't really land for me when it came to the main character, just because we have so little time to develop and spend time with those characters. But man, by the time we get to the grocery store and shit hits the fan, I love this story. There are some disturbing moments in here. And when it comes to monsters within Stephen King's like little world here that I've read, the monsters in this book are some of my all-time favorites, especially the spiders. Like when you get to the sequence with the spiders in this, I think I would just give up. I think I would just be like, I'm gonna die now. This is it for me because I would be so scared. So from the time when the mist rolls in all the way to the end, I love this story. And yeah, some great Stephen King monsters and ultimately a really fun story. I just wish it was longer. I guess that's my biggest gripe with this is I wish it was more because I really enjoyed it. So, yep, that is The Mist. Coming in at number 12 is actually the Stephen King book that I finished the most recently, and that is The Running Man. And I like this one more than I thought I would. I recently saw not Glenn Close. What is the guy's name? Glenn Powell. Glenn Powell. That's who I was trying to say. I don't know why I thought of Glenn Close. Glenn Powell movie. I never saw the Arnold movie, so I just have the Glenn Powell movie. I enjoyed it. I thought it was okay. Like I didn't really love it. So going into The Running Man, like I really liked the premises of this guy against the world. Everybody's trying to hunt him down, but I didn't think the movie was like that great. So going into this, I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm gonna like it or not. And I really enjoyed this book. Like I love Ben Richards and his just like screw you attitude towards the whole establishment. I love how sassy and just fed up with life he is. And if you don't know, Ben Richards, it lives in this dystopian future where basically the poor have to go on these television shows where they either get horribly maimed or sometimes die in order to like earn money for their families. And he has a daughter that is sick and he can't earn any money. So he goes on this show called The Running Man, where he has to survive for a month and everybody out there in the world is trying to kill him. Like if they see him out in the open, they can report him to this like hotline and there's hunters out there that are trying to find him and kill him. And so it's this man just trying to stay alive. And it was just very fast paced, very exciting. I loved the end of this book. Like the way that it ends is just so abrupt and like wow, that blew my mind. I saw it coming because I saw the movie, but it's still even reading it, I was just like, "Wow, you really went there." I guess the one big gripe about this story that I have is I really wish that we had seen more of like the everyday citizens interacting with Ben Richards and like selling him out. That's one thing I think the movie did a little bit better. In this book, you never really get those moments where Ben is just talking to a random person and then they recognize him and then you see them start like going on their phone. Like we don't really get that. It's a lot of other different stuff, him interacting with different characters all around the country. So kind of missed that aspect of it. But besides that, this was just really fast paced. It only took me like a day to get through this story. And it just moves at a breakneck speed. And I thought it was really cool. And there's some cool commentary in here as well about just like social order and classism and stuff like that that I enjoyed. So I'm talking way longer about this, but I think it's because I just finished it recently. So that is The Running Man coming in at number 12. Coming in at number 11 is another one of these. Love the first half, didn't really like the second half of the book, and that is Fairy Tale. The first half of this book is incredible. I love the bonding between Charlie and Mr. Bowditch and Radar the dog and just the relationship that the three of them build together. That is the core, like, emotional pull of this story to me. And it's kind of ironic because all the things I loved best about this book are the things that happen in the real world, not the fantasy world, which is kind of problematic and why it's lower on this list than maybe it is for other people who really enjoyed the fantasy aspect of the story. But once we get to that second half and we do delve into this fantasy world, I just thought it was okay. I mean, there's certain aspects of it that I thought were cool, like this plague disease thing that's warping everybody's facial features and killing them. I thought that was interesting, but frankly, when it got to the climax of the story and we're in this like final location, I was losing track of what was going on during the finale. I was like, what is happening here? And it just by the time I finished the story, I realized that the thing that I liked the most was that first half when we were just in the real world and it was the story of this boy bonding with this older man and getting to hear his stories and his tales of life. Um, that I almost spoiled something. I won't say anything, but that was the part of this book that I love the most. And so, yeah, fairy tale, I feel weird about this one. Like the fairy tale, the fantasy aspect is the aspect of this book that I didn't really enjoy. And I feel like when it comes to a fantasy book, that's a little problematic, you know? So that is fairy tale coming in at number 11. Coming in at number 10 is going to be The Institute. I really like this story. This one consistently throughout I thought was very fun. The main draw for me for this book is the kids. Luke, I think the main character's name is. He gets transported to this institute where there's a bunch of kids there being experimented on. They're basically trying to draw psychic powers out of them. It's like this like black ops section of the government that's trying to use psychic kids to like assassinate foreign targets. And I love the bond that forms between all of these kids who are in this just awful, terrible situation where they're being tested on and exposed to horrible conditions, and they're just trying to like stay with each other and find some humanity in each other and just keep like a positive outlook. You know, they're trying to escape, they're trying to figure out what they can do to get out of here. And those kids are like the main thing that I go back to. There's also another character, kind of a side plot that, or it's not really a side plot, it's like a B plot that happens at the very beginning and towards the end of this book. I cannot remember the character's name, but he is this guy that kind of volunteers at this police department for this really small town, and his plot and the kids' plots kind of intersect expect in a way that I thought was extremely fun and satisfying. The showdown that happens in that town was visceral and crazy. I won't say anything more. I feel like I'm treading into spoiler territory there. But yeah, I just really enjoyed all aspects of this book. I didn't think any of it was like mind-blowingly great, but this was a consistent book that I thoroughly enjoyed, and those kids are what I really appreciated the most out of this book. There are some very emotional and heartfelt and heartbreaking moments that revolve around the horrors that they're going through in this establishment. So that is The Institute coming in at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is actually the only book on here that I've read twice, and it might not be one you expect. It is On Writing. I've had to read this book twice for 2 different classes that I've been taking for school, and this book is great. This is actually also my first Stephen King book, which is pretty weird. Like, most people are probably like, The Shining or The Stand or something like that. But no, my first Stephen King book was On Writing. I read it for school, and then I read it that was many, many years ago. That was probably 10 years ago for my first degree that I got. And then for another degree that I'm pursuing now, I had to read this recently, just like a year ago. And I definitely appreciated this way more a second time, having read some of Stephen King's stuff and being more interested in him as a person, getting to read this book and see more backstory about his life. This is a nonfiction. I should probably mention that. It's a little autobiographical about him as a writer and what his life looked like up to the point where he was writing this book. And then also, he gives, in the second half of the book, he gives some advice to writers on how to write well. And so the first half of this book was very interested as somebody who is a fan of Stephen King, and I like him as a person and following his life's journey. That autobiographical section was very cool. And then, as somebody who is currently pursuing a degree in writing and who is very interested in being a writer, the second half of this book I just thought was full of extremely useful information. I definitely think this is a must read for anybody that is interested in writing. At least the second half is, because I think Stephen King's advice is extremely useful. And I've thought about this book a lot since I read it as I'm writing things. So, a great book, nonfiction, not the most exciting read, especially if you're not a Stephen King fan. Definitely not compared to, all these different fictional journeys, but a great book, a very valuable book. And like I said, my first Stephen King book, On Writing, coming in at number 9. Coming in at number 8 is going to be The Long Walk. This is a great book. I really enjoyed my time with it. I just love the social commentary in the story and the conversations that the main characters have together. If you're not familiar, this is about a dystopian future where I think in the book it's 2 boys from every state. I get confused with the movie a little bit because I've watched the movie a lot. I think in the movie it's 1 kid from each state. In the book, it's 2 kids from each state, but they have to go on this walk where they must maintain a certain speed. And if they drop below that speed too many times within set amount of time, they get executed where they stand. And so it is this last man standing. They have to keep walking on a journey with no endpoints. And whoever finishes the long walk, whoever the last kid walking is, gets granted a wish of whatever they want and a lot of money and untold riches. Very much like The Hunger Games, but this was written way before The Hunger Games. And it's just a very intense book. Like, the whole premise, not knowing who's going to be eliminated next as you get attached to these characters. But the main thing that I love is just the conversations that these boys have together when they talk about the state of the United States and politics and the social commentary surrounding the long walk. Like, how can people watch this and cheer for it and think that it's an awesome spectator sport? I love a lot of the commentary in there. Surprisingly, this book was written a long time ago, but I thought a lot of the lessons and morals that King was talking about in the story are very applicable in today's world. So definitely worth a read. If you're up on today's political environment. But yeah, I just really like this one. The one thing I will say is this is probably the only example of this on this list that I can think of off the top of my head, but I kind of like the movie a little bit more. I think the movie is so awesome and so just I love the main characters, DeVries and Garrity, and their bond in the movie, and I thought it was just done a little bit more. I felt more of an emotional attachment to the story in the movie, but there's a little changes here and there. There's a little bit of well, I'd say a pretty significant ending difference between the book and the movie. But overall, if you like the movie, check out the book because it's also very good. Yeah, that is The Long Walk coming in at number 8. So now we're at number 7. These are all of my favorite Stephen King books from this point forward. Numbers 7 through 4 are pretty interchangeable on any given day. I might say I like one more than the other, but these are some of my all-time favorite books. Coming in at number 7 is going to be Carrie, the original Stephen King novel. I have watched this movie so many times. All of the adaptations of Carrie I've watched so many times, and finally getting to go and read the book after having seen the movie so many times was just so much fun. My biggest regret is I wish I could have read this book without having seen the movie because I was just so interested to know how I would react to the story because I love how this book is written. It is just like one giant paragraph. There's no chapters in here, but it's telling the story of Carrie in real time, and then there are these little snippets of like a fast forward where there's a news clipping or an interview that's talking about the aftermath of the climax of this story. And I love how Stephen King is always hinting at what happens without the audience knowing exactly what happens. Obviously, having read the or watched the movie, I knew what was going to happen, and so that's why I wish I could have read this book with a clear brain, not knowing what the story was. But still, going back, seeing the original tale, I love Carrie as a character. She's one of my favorite tragic main characters in anything ever, and this is just such a great read and such a great book, and I had a fun time with it, finally getting to go back and see where it all began. Coming in at number 6 is the book that he wrote right after Carrie, and that is Salem's Lot. And what I'll say about this one is I think I've read a decent amount of vampire literature in my life, very recently too, especially with all of the horror and gothic literature classes I've been taking. I've read Bram Stoker's Dracula, John Polidori's The Vampire, Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla. I recently read Children of the Night by Dan Simmons, and there's others as well that I can't think of off the top of my head. But when it comes to vampire stories, Salem's Lot is my all-time favorite. I think this is vampires done at its absolute best. This book is dark and disturbing, and seeing this town of Salem's Lot just get ravaged by vampires and slowly descend into chaos is super fun. There is one scene in particular where there's this vampire outside of someone's window, and it is one of the most creepy things I think I've ever experienced in my life when it comes to, experience something off of a written page. A movie is one thing, you get that visual experience, and it takes a lot more for a book to have that sort of like imprinting visual, impression that a movie does. But that scene in this book is one that always stands out to me where I'm like, I got shivers while I was reading that section of the book. So a really, really fun time. Vampires done at its best. Stephen King at one of his best. And definitely recommend checking this one out if you love vampire stories. Oh, I forgot to mention Twilight. That's another one, but I don't really count that. We won't count Twilight. No. Salem's Lot is a lot better than Twilight. Coming in at number 5 is going to be The Shining. I think this is one that everybody's familiar with, and this is another one like Carrie. I had seen the movie so many times before I finally decided to delve into the book, and my fiance had warned me that the book was gonna be very different from the movie. The movie The Shining was one of my favorites of all time. It is one of my favorites of all time, and I was very surprised at how different the book was from the movie, but man, did I love this book. It is much more focused on Jack Torrance and sort of his mental downfall. The movie focuses more on supernatural elements, where this book is much more focused on character elements. And I love seeing Jack's history, his past, how his parents treated him, how his father acted, how that has played into how he acts in real life and how he acts towards Danny and Wendy in this story. And just seeing him descend into madness in the fear and terror that Wendy, I keep wanting to call Wendy Shelley. I keep thinking of Shelley Duvall, that Wendy and Danny have to go through in this book is just mind-bogglingly terrifying. And I love the end of this story so, so much. So definitely check it out. But if you've only seen the movie, just expect that this is going to be a little bit different. But I ultimately like the book a little bit more, especially if you're into deep dives of characters and seeing the horrors that generational trauma can cause on a person. This is an excellent book. I love The Shining. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Night Shift. This is another short story collection, and unlike Everything's Eventual, I remember and love almost every single story in this book. I can't talk about all of them because there's like 20 plus stories in here, but it opens with an excellent short story that expands upon the ending of Salem's Lot. So if you're a fan of that book, you've got an excellent starter there. The second short story is one called Graveyard Shift, which is about these guys that are cleaning out this underground, I think it's like a hotel or something that is infested by rats. And if you love like animal horror and body horror and the disgusting things that can come along with cleaning out a massive infestation, you've got that in there. There's a story called The Lawnmower Man, which is one of my personal favorite short stories ever. It's just so wacky and weird. And when I finished it, I was just like, what the hell did I just read? But it's very entertaining. Quitters Inc. is another one that sticks out to me in this book about the extreme lengths that someone will go to stop smoking. And then you have Children of the Corn in here, which is probably one of the most noteworthy stories in this collection because, Children of the Corn is an awesome horror movie and it is based off of that story. So, Night Shift, definitely. Probably actually my favorite short story collection of all time that I can think of. It's battling it out for with one other Felix Blackwell collection, but easily in my top two favorite short story collections ever. And I love it as a Stephen King book. It is awesome. All right, we're at the top 3 now. Number 3 is a book that I think is higher placed on my list than it is on most people's list, but I really love this book so much, and that is The Dead Zone. I have talked extensively on this channel about my love for this story, so if you watch a lot of my videos, I'm sorry because I'm gonna talk about it even more, but my favorite part of this book is just Johnny Smith as a character. For someone with the most basic name ever, Johnny Smith, he is the most non-basic character ever. I love the journey that he is going through in this story. He has some psychic abilities and he can use it to foresee the future and he has to decide what to do with those powers. People don't believe him when he tries to warn them about a terrible thing that's going to happen and then it happens and then they're like, wow, this guy is correct, and then they start to worship him and see him as a god, and the media gets involved and it kind of ruins some of the relationships that he has, and he's going back and forth on whether or not to use this power for good or not. And I just love that back and forth that he goes through. It's unlike anything that I've seen when it comes to a character with psychic abilities. I love that it tackles that darker side of having this ability. It's like maybe it's not always a good thing to use it. And then the ending of this story is probably my second favorite ending of a book ever, with my favorite ending actually coming up here very shortly in the next couple books. But the ending of this book left me in literal tears. It was so heartbreaking and sad, but it was exactly what it needed to be. And whenever somebody says that Stephen King struggles with endings, I point to this book and I point to one more book that's coming up here in just a minute. So, The Dead Zone, definitely worth checking out. Like I said, I think I probably place this a little higher than most people do. I don't know if a lot of people would put this above The Shining and Salem's Lot and Carrie, but this is one of my favorite books ever. I love The Dead Zone, so it's coming in at number 3. Next up is number 2, and I have a pretty basic top 2. These are both books that appear on everybody's, like, top 5 Stephen King books, but there's a reason for that. They're awesome stories, and so they're gonna be my favorite as well. Number 2 for me is The Stand, and this is actually one of the first Stephen King books I read. I have a very bizarre order. It goes, like, On Writing, and then 1922, and then Later, and then I'm pretty sure The Stand was, like, the 4th book I ever read by him, so a very bizarre journey to start my Stephen King journey, but this was the book where once I read it, I realized that Stephen King is gonna be one of my favorites. Pretty confidently after reading this book was like Stephen King is one of my top 10 favorite authors of all time. And then a couple books later, I was like, he's my favorite author of all time. This is just such a complex and awesome story. The thing that really sticks out to me the most, and there's a lot, there's great characters, great plot, an awesome ending. I thought the ending was done very well. But the opening of this book was haunting. So I read it when COVID was going on. So maybe that had a little bit more of an impact on me because the opening of this book is talking about this virus that gets loose, and how it quickly spreads throughout humanity. And the first like 20 or so, like 30 chapters or something like that, are just following this virus as it's going around, quickly spreading and just absolutely decimating all of humankind. And I remember reading that opening and just being like, Oh my god, what is happening? This is so crazy. And then you, of course, get to see all the fallout from that, all the different characters they interweave through the plot here. I love the main theme of like good versus evil and who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, who can you trust, the betrayals that happen in this story. Everything is just so awesome. And even though this book is like 1,200 pages long, to me it felt like it was like a 200-page book with how invested I was in everything that was going on in this story. I just absolutely breezed through it. So that is The Stand, absolutely worth checking out. Yeah, this book is incredible. So if you haven't read it yet, what are you doing? Go read The Stand. And coming in at number one, this isn't just my favorite Stephen King book. This is my favorite book of all time. It was a year ago when I made my 10 favorite books of all time list, and there still has not been a book that I've read that has usurped it. And that is 11/22/63. Everything about this book, I think, is pure magic. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said The Dead Zone has like my second favorite ending of all time. This book has my favorite ending of all time. And the thing that surprised me the most is I'm not someone that really gets caught up in romances. Like, I'll appreciate a good romance in a story, but this book, the main character whose name Jake Epping, it just escaped my brain for a second. Jake Epping and the relationship that he gets in this story and how that relationship plays out was so emotional and heartbreaking, and it plays a lot into how the book kind of wraps up towards the end. And all I can say is this is how you do an ending to a book. It is awesome. But besides that, besides the romance, you have this great tale of Jake having to go back in time to stop the Kennedy assassination. And it's just it's a daunting book when you look at it from Jake's perspective, when you see how much that he has to go through, the trauma, the planning, the plotting that he has to go through when he messes up sometimes and has to do it all over from the beginning, the years of his life that are spent trying to pursue this goal. I felt like I was in his shoes and I felt the exhaustion that he was feeling. And when things were finally over, it was like a sigh of relief, just being like, the journey is done. And, man, just a great character, a great plot, a great setup, so many twists and turns and just moments that I didn't expect to happen. The ways in which Jake gets drawn away from his main quest and has to deal with something that is just completely non-consequential to stopping the assassination, but you're like, he can't just run away from this moment, he has to deal with it. That happens a lot in this book, and I love that. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Just this is a great book. Whenever somebody asks me, they're like, "What's one book that I should absolutely read?" I say 11/22/63. This is my favorite book. It will remain my favorite book for probably a while, maybe forever. I don't know. I'm just waiting for me to read something to finish it and have that emotional resonance that I felt when I finished this story, and I haven't felt it yet. So, this is my favorite Stephen King book. Love it. Definitely check it out. All right, y'all. So that is my ranking of the 21 Stephen King books that I've read from least favorite to favorite. Let me know down in the comments what you feel about this ranking, how you would rank some of these books, which ones are your favorite, which ones are your least favorite. What are your favorite Stephen King books if they're not on this list? Let me know, like, what are the next ones I should read? And thank you so much if you stayed throughout this entire video for watching all of it. Thank you for being here. But my name is Christian. This is the Endless TBR. Thanks so much again. Stay safe out there and peace out.